van? Het is 4 voor 7.
Er zijn nog wat mensen aan het inschrijven beneden in security, dus we gaan een paar minuten later.
Ja?
Ja.
Maar dan zou het... Oké, lekker.
Ik zat in.
Goed. Oh ja, wacht hè. Maar tot nu toe... Yes.
Thanks for listening.
Well, thanks for playing. Thank you. You'll be back. Dames en heren, goedenavond. Hallo, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Dolph, and it's a great honor to be back in The Hague, one of the most beautiful cities around Scheveningen. And I'm very happy to be here. It's good to be here in the Paard. It's been a long time since I've been in a Paard. But enough about my sex life. Let's talk about important subjects. It's good to be here in the Paard, which used to be the Paard van Troje. There's all kinds of ladies trying to take my picture. You'll get nothing, just like a stripe. That's what it is. But some men like a picture of me just to postpone their orgasms. Ladies and gentlemen, it is great to be here in The Hague. I will welcome you all in the Together event. Do we feel together tonight? It's incredible. Oh my God! Please shut the lights. There's even a catwalk. I mean, I could be a model. We are here in the Paard. We are here. I will say this just to clear. I talk English to you. If that is a problem, well, fuck that. There is simultaneous translation stuff. You can get simultaneous translation. You can even wear 2 headphones and get, let's say, German on one head and Dutch on the other head. And you'll go crazy. That's fine. That's no problem. And you can listen to me. If there's any questions, I will moderate this evening. If there's anything you want to know, you can raise your hand. I might not see you, but then at least you've raised your hand. I welcome you all on behalf of, watch now, the group of the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats in the European Parliament. That's what we are here. The group of Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats in the European Parliament. If you can say that 3 times, you win a prize. So just to be clear about all this, it is a group of an alliance, which in Dutch is dubbel op. Fuck that. It's a progressive alliance of socialists and Democrats, which seems to leave the possibility for a conservative alliance of socialists and Democrats. That'll be the day. And it says socialists and Democrats, but of course we know that most socialists are Democrats. And if only most Democrats were socialists, we wouldn't have to be here because the world was ready. Okay, we'll have speakers and panelists and the whole shebang. In Dutch we say, kosten nog moeite gespaard. En ik sta hier weer voor 4 consumptiebonnen. Dames en heren, but I don't like this laugh. I don't like this at all. What I will do, somebody will, you never know what will happen. First I will show you a video, because we had the whole screen and everything. There's actually a network which is now gone. It's Paard Guest, which is a very strange network to me. Yeah. But anyway, I will show you a short video. At least it says short here, you never know. It's a video about why we're here and why we are together. And it will look a little bit like this.
And we arrived to a point where the European Union created prosperity. Economic growth was seen as a model for other parts of the world, based on values such as democracy, tolerance, justice, human rights. Things seemed to be going in the right direction. So what went wrong?
Economic crisis, high unemployment, persistent low growth. The resurgence of populism, radicalization of society as a whole, the rise of terrorist groups who want to cause death and destruction. The future ahead seems dark sometimes, when we just focus on this news, on what pulls us apart, not what brings us together. Is this the future we want? Is this the future we see for ourselves and our children? Shouldn't we try to find a different way, tell a different story to the rest of the world? Shouldn't we tell ourselves a different story, a brighter one? A story of hope, of possibilities, of joy and happiness.
This is the story of a journey. This is the story of a new path. This is a story of a path towards a better Europe. A story of lives, like the ones of you and me, who want simple things, like peace, a job, a community who cares, an education for our children, a place where our taxes contribute to building a better society, and for a union of equality, justice, fairness.
This is why we need to debate, discuss,
find new solutions.
together.
Juntos.
Společně.
Insieme.
Carto.
Razem. Skupaj.
Together. Zusammen.
Sam.
Juntos.
Zajedno.
Juntos.
Ensemble.
Well, thank you very much. Samen is in Dutch. Samen. Should you want to react tonight already or during the proceedings here, and you should want to use a hashtag. The hashtag is Europe Together, which is one word, Europe Together. So you can do that if you want, and use Twitter or whatever you use, and post pictures of me and say, where did I end up tonight? Stuff like that. Okay, there'll be quite a few speakers. The two main speakers I will introduce in a short while, and then there will be rapturous applause because I promised him that. But for this man, I want at least, well, sort of half rapturous applause in the least. Should it be more, it'll be a great night. It's not him because he's just somebody who's thinking, well, I'm going to walk on stage. Which is fine because I hardly saw him, but that was because he was wearing a very black T-shirt. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce a member of European Parliament and head of the Dutch S&D delegation, Paul Tang. Paul Tang is coming here. Yes.
And how cool it is to be here, really. I've never been in a pop stage. When I was young, of course, I wanted to be either a professional football player or a singer in a rock and roll band.
Paul,
I just ended up being a politician.
Paul,
I know.
I don't know if you know the level of Dutch football. You could be a professional football player. It's no problem at all. I don't know how you're about your singing, but you could. You could.
Let me not sing tonight. No, probably not. Dear comrades, thank you very much for coming. I know, you're here to hear Lodewijk Asscher, Jean Corbet, and of course, Jeremy Corbyn, but allow me to say a few words, allow me to express my personal gratitude. That you are here tonight is very special for me personally. Because this is the town where I started as politician more than 10 years ago, with a strong conviction that we have to fight the race to the bottom. And I was quickly to find out I was one of a few voices against a conservative broad majority. And because this is the country which likes to think it's small, but is, in matter of fact, huge. The Netherlands is huge in tax avoidance. Really. In fact, we are here and now today in the heartland of tax avoidance industry, allowed by right-wing politicians promoting tax competition, enabled by tax advisors constructing loopholes, and of course, influenced by corporate lobbyists promising investment that will never come. And this is the society where we think we are equal, but where workers find it very hard to get a permanent job and rather get a temporary contract. Where workers don't see their wages rise, but rather get a compliment for their hard work, where they see the housing prices rise and are driven from their cities. Whereas at the same time, corporate profits are sky high and corporate taxes are rock bottom and even fallen. Is it any wonder that people ask themselves, am I working for the system or is the system still working for me? And what happened to the idea that everyone contributes to society? Everyone, also the big corporates and the millionaires. That they wonder, is it any wonder that they asked, what happened to the notion of fairness? Of course they do. Of course they question and they ask. In fact, in these 10 years that I've been in politics, I have seen the problem of tax avoidance grow. I've seen the race to the bottom accelerate. Take the years of the crisis. Everything went down or even collapsed. The stock market, the housing prices, consumption, employment, everything went down except the profits that were going through this country, except the profits trying to escape taxation. That continued to grow significantly. By now, I think the big corporation and their tax advisor have found every loophole in the tax system, and I think there are many. And if it were only the Netherlands that would cater to the needs of big business. The Netherlands, is a world player in tax avoidance. But if it were only the Netherlands, a world player is also Ireland, Singapore, Switzerland, Luxembourg. So when you hear tax havens, you probably think of some exotic place like the Bahamas, Bermuda, or Cayman Islands. But as a matter of fact, the main tax havens, the main culprits, the main pirates are within Europe and within the European Union. Now, no reason to despair. I have not become more pessimistic in these 10 years. On the contrary, I have become more and more optimistic that we can change this. The tide is turning ever since the crisis, slowly but surely. First of all, I see a growing awareness, and that you are here tonight is a sign of that. I see a growing awareness that the tax system is rotten at the heart, that we cannot live with one set of rules for ordinary people and another set of rules for the big and the rich. And indeed, revelations like LuxLeaks, Panama Papers, Paradise Papers, the sweetheart deal with Shell recently, have helped us, have helped to raise awareness. They bring to the day of light the deals that can't stay the day of light. They will help awareness. And second, I've seen that the discussion have become more European, more global. When I was in national parliament, the discussion was national, not any longer. The discussion has become European and has become global. And I've been happy to get support from a broad majority in the European Parliament for a European corporate tax. And happy not because it's European, but happy because it proposes a structural reform of the corporate tax system. It is a game changer. That's why we got the support. And European actions and international actions like this are within our reach and make us help turn the tide. And this is why also tonight is very special. No longer national. Needs to be European, needs to be international. And I see here people from across Europe. I see my colleagues from the European Parliament, from France and Portugal, Pervenche Beres and Ana Gomez. I see the team, the Labour team from England. I've seen the members, the Labour members from Germany and the Netherlands. I see my friends from the Partij van de Arbeid. And there's an entire bus from Belgium, from the SPA. Yes, thank you for being here. And this is what it is tonight. This is Europe together. And this is what we need to turn the tide for good. So from the bottom of my heart, well, thank you very much for being here. And may I now introduce a colleague that is close to my heart, that I value very high. He's also a board member of the SPD, the German SPD. But he's also and mainly the leader of the Socialists and Democrats in the European Parliament, Udo Bullmann. Come on stage, please.
I'm not sure. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks, Paul, for your nice words. We are here. I appreciate that Dolph is with us. We will have a great evening. I saw Dolph was struggling a bit with our name. We'll make it easy. Call us Social Democrats. And if this is still too complicated, what I do not hope, then follow the red color, because we are the red ones. This is our color. And guys, you got it right. For the many, not the few. This is our slogan. Thank you. And we pay tribute to Jeremy because he created this slogan, he and his team. And for the many, not the few. This is what we are doing, whether we come from the UK, whether we come from Belgium, from the Netherlands, from Denmark, from Warsaw, from wherever. If we are in Spain, in Portugal, in France, this is what we are doing. And this is our policy. And we invite you tonight to discuss this with us because we are in difficult situations. We, the Social Democrats, we, the labor movement, have elaborated the social welfare state during the last 100 years. This was our policy. This was for the many, not the few. We organized the kids could go to school, even the children of the poor people. We organized healthcare, social housing, a fair and just society. But this today is under threat because we have powerful enemies. We have Mr. Putin, who dislikes the rule of law, who dislikes democracy, and we have this interesting personality in the White House on the other side of the planet who has no interest in any multilateral agreements anymore, who has no interest in democratic values, who has no interest in societies with a human face. So the Europeans have to learn, more or less, at the very moment, we stand alone. And all those people in the world looking for democratic values, the rule of law, the defense of just societies, are hoping that we get our act together, that we defend humanity, that we are the burning heart of decency, as Jeffrey Sachs put it when he was commenting on the Social Democrats in Europe. This is our destiny, this is our future, and this is what we are fighting for. This fight is a huge fight because we have external enemies, but we also have internal enemies. Look at Orban, Kurz, Wilders. Look at all those guys. Seehofer from Bavaria. trying to make the refugees the scapegoats of their policies. This is a shame, my dear friends, and we will not allow them to be the Trojan horse within the European Union. We will fight them back. They have the money. They have the money. They have the support of the rich and the powerful. But we are the many, not the few. This is our chance, my dear friends. And this is why we will fight the next European election in a mode, in a spirit you have never seen, because we are at the crossroads of humanity. We are at a situation where it's upon Europe, where it's about us, social democrats, progressives, socialist movement, labor movement, to set the course for the future of the globe. Did we in the past get everything right? I fear not. Many of our policy discourses were influenced by neoliberal thoughts. Many social Democrats also thought, well, the slim state is the answer to our problems. Doesn't matter if some at the periphery, well, it's their fault, and then they have to learn their lesson. No, this is wrong, my dear friends. If we not taking care of each and everybody, if the future of not everybody is closest at our heart, then we will not convince our people to mobilize the best of energy, which is possible in a society. So we are dedicated, not only in the defense, we are dedicated to go to the offensive. We learned our lesson. We need a new narrative. Yes, indeed. We cannot talk about the economy without talking about the environment. We cannot talk about the environment without talking about jobs, qualified jobs. And when we talk about the environment and the sustainability of our economic and social future, it's also about the social dimension. Because also the poor people's kid would not like to be poisoned afterwards by dirty diesel cars wherever they come from Germany, from the Great Britain, or from Japan. This is what we have at stake. This is our political program. And we would like to encourage everybody, like Dolph, like you, like all those people who listen to us and to look at us tonight, to join this fight. And together we can do it. Yes. Thank you very much.
Udo Boerman and Paul Tang. Jazeker wel. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Watch the steps. That is just great.
That. And so it is about understanding that and understanding that communication with people. Now, we have a situation in Britain where there has been a referendum to vote to leave the European Union. You're all aware of that. We have a Conservative government in Britain which is divided between those who say they want to negotiate an agreement with the European Union and those who say they don't want any agreement with anybody, they want to jump off a cliff and hold hands with Donald Trump and see if he's prepared to help them out. That would be catastrophic in any terms. Our position, and I make this very clear, is that yes, there was a referendum result. We are not leaving Europe. We are working with people in Europe, with socialists in Europe, with the left in Europe, and we want to build that left unity across Europe on common programs against austerity, environmental sustainability, human rights, and against the far right within our society. And I am very determined we should achieve that. If you think of the issues that are facing this planet, number one, our environmental degradation, support it, strengthen it, and work together. Because environmental degradation obviously damages all of us ultimately, but more immediately, lack of environmental controls kills children on busy streets in urban areas, reduces life expectancy. And the other issue is one about democracy. Democracy and the power of elections and elected governments. We live in a society where we elect governments, we elect members of parliament, we elect members of the European Parliament, local authorities, and all these. But there are greater powers in the world, and that is of global corporations that move seamlessly, apparently, from one jurisdiction to another, to another, to another, all the while making profits, damaging working conditions, and avoiding and evading tax. I think it is time that we came together in a much stronger way in chasing down the tax evaders and the tax avoiders. Read the Paradise Papers. Read what they said about the systematic evasion and avoidance that is going on. We had this demonstration this afternoon outside Shell, and you ask yourself the question, is it right that a global corporation of the size of that should have the power to negotiate its own tax arrangements with one national government after another? Or should there be, and there has to be, international agreement to collect tax from them, country-by-country reporting of the tax affairs of all corporations, and a closing down of these comfortable tax havens in the Caribbean and many other places that are often related to European countries. Because tax avoidance means greater inequality, means greater profits at the top for the very richest within our world. And at the other end, it means hospitals in need of medicines, children in need of teachers, and homeless people in need of somewhere to live. The austerity we've been told and taught is so necessary has damaged living standards and conditions over the past 10 years, has, in some cases, even reduced life expectancy, has led to greater and greater health inequality and wealth inequality as well. And at the other end, the tax burden, as they choose to call it, of the very richest has actually reduced, as one country after another tries to bribe, not in a dishonest way, but in a way of saying, well, if we charge you less tax, will you come here, or will you go here or here? There has to be a unity in order to achieve some kind of social justice. So I simply say this: the left across Europe have got to offer an alternative to the economics of austerity. Austerity is not an economic necessity, it's a political choice that was made, which is so damaging to so many people across this continent. And we want that good and close relationship with everyone in Europe. I think we can come together demanding workers' rights, improved workers' rights, trade union rights. We can be together demanding better environmental protections. We can be together opposing racism and recognizing that refugees and migrants are humans too. Refugees and migrants have rights and wishes too. And I finish on this. 2 weeks ago, I was in a refugee camp in Jordan talking to young people there. And you know what? Their aims, their wishes, their ambitions were just the same as everyone in this room. They wanted to live in peace, live in safety. The young people wanted to be doctors, engineers, nurses, all kinds of professions they wanted to follow. But they're stuck in a refugee camp because of a war that was not of their making, and they are victims of it. And there are 65 million of them around the world. Europe must play its part. Share out the responsibility for helping them and share out that burden. I want to finish with a point of success and optimism. Last week, there were elections in Mexico. 130 candidates were murdered during the election campaign. 150 journalists were murdered during the election campaign. People who tried to tell the truth about corruption, tried to tell the truth about the dangers in their society. They died, but an election took place. Andrés Manuel López Obrador, the left candidate, won the presidency with the biggest majority that's ever been received in Mexican history, on a program of ending corruption, on a program of opposition to the economics and politics of neoliberalism, and saying that the marginalised people deserve their place in the sun and their opportunity to be part of our society. And you know what? Around the world there are millions and millions of people that think with the same socialist, community and cohesive values that we do. And you know what? United and strong, we can defeat the forces of reaction, we can defeat the forces of neoliberalism, and we can say to the next generation, yes, you will be better off than this generation. Yes, you will live on a planet where war is not the norm. You will live on a planet that I hope we've played our part in protecting, and a future I hope we've played our part in safeguarding for everybody. That is what socialism is about and looks like. Thank you very much.
Jeremy Corbyn. Thank you. You're one of your members of Team Corbyn because you got a team.
They're a wonderful team.
They're a wonderful team. She just said he has to leave 7 minutes ago.
So we've got minus 7 minutes then.
So we'll talk a bit faster. Just one question. No problem. One question from my side. Is you're talking about austerity, the fight against austerity. Is that something that will get the masses moving? The populists and the far right, they play the blame game. They talk about the asylum seekers, the foreigners, even the left, they play the blame game. Is what you do, the fight against austerity, will that get the masses moving, and how will you do that?
Yes, I do think the fight against austerity gets people moving. I do think explaining and working with communities as to how they can improve their living standards and improve the strength of community does change things. If we disempower ourselves by simply watching politics as a spectator sport on television, then we don't achieve everything. If we engage through a combination of social media and street activities, things do change, and we get that popular movement going. And so the demands of better rights at work, the demands of those that work on the gig economy, those that are grossly exploited by high technology platforms are very important. Campaigning on those not just brings success for those individuals, but brings that whole feeling that we can achieve things together. I think it is possible to do it, but make sure the language we use is one that is readily understood by all the people that we're talking to.
Thank you. Jeremy Corbyn, would you please join me and maybe the audience in welcoming our next guests? Who is actually, I mean, he's the leader of Labour in this country. You could say, we call it the P van de A, but of course it is Labour. It must be something similar to that. It is the banner, it is for the many, not the few. Dames en heren, Lodewijk Asscher! And thank you, Jeremy Corbyn!
Jeremy, just 1 second. I was going to ask them to chant for you, but you're leaving too early because you're used to that reception. But thank you for a great, great speech on behalf of all of us. There we go. And I think if there's 2 points we should take away from this speech that are relevant to all of us, it's about what we can do to make a change. Because when Jeremy Corbyn is talking about corporate race to the bottom, that's money taken away from our future. It's money taken away from investing in affordable houses, taken away from investing in teachers, nurses, things this country, but most countries in Europe desperately need. And the second part, which actually means a lot, I think, to all of us emotionally, is what are we going to do about Europe? Are we going to stand by and watch as populists, extremists are going to divide us even worse? You see Brexit happening, which is a tragical accident. But you see on the eastern side of Europe that democracy and rule of law are under serious threat. And you see in Italy that fascist language is used to describe Roma and immigrants. And this is the point where it comes up to us to say, this stops here. in Europe we are together, we build a future together, we can only face the challenges of this world together, and we will not let this happen. And it comes up, of course, to the politicians, but more so to you, the new generation, to make very clear that we will not be divided, that we will not buy the cheap stories of scapegoating, that we will not fall for the fantasy that countries on their own are able to solve the problems of today, because we do know that we're in this together. So my lesson from the past years, but also the lesson we should take away from Jeremy Corbyn's speech. The UK may be leaving, but Labour's not. The UK may be on a wrong path, and Theresa May's government is making, I don't know how to say it in a polite way, just a miserable mess of handling Brexit. But the bill is going to be paid by workers in the UK, and also here, in Ireland, in the Netherlands, and Belgium. So our lesson should be, let's stop this, let's stop the corporate race to the bottom, let's make sure investment is in affordable houses, in healthcare, in education, and let's never, never, ever be divided by the forces of the extreme right, because Europe is ours, Europe is yours, and the future is for Europe, and we're in this together. Thank you very much.
Lodewijk Asscher, we can stand a bit up here. I just took the second microphone. This is just for the sound. Also, vragen, when there are any questions for Lodewijk, there's blue stuff. It's like a box. You can throw it around. If you got it, you can speak in it. It's like a box, and you can just speak into the box, and we will hear you, which is like a fucking miracle to me. So if there's any question, you just raise your hand or any other body part. There's a question over there, and you have the box, so you can speak. Yes,
preferably the hand.
I have to hand out the box.
Sorry?
I only have to hand out the box.
You have to hand out the box, so like a box hand-outer.
Exactly.
But it's great to be a student and have a job. But that's just fine.
That's why I'm here.
It is.
Yeah.
I'll have one question for Lodewijk Asscher, and then maybe you will have... I read an earlier version of a speech, or maybe a speech you gave earlier, and it said that, like you just said, the UK seems to be leaving Europe, but Labour isn't. That's what Jeremy Corbyn also said. And then at a certain point it said there will be a deal between UK and Europe. The deal must include measures to tackle tax avoidance and to stop the fiscal race to the bottom, which sounds great, and I think a lot of people in this room think, yeah, that should happen. But will it happen, and why should they make it happen? If you look at Dutch government, if you look at quite a few other governments in Europe, they're not working on this at all. No. You can say this must happen, these measures must be taken, but will they, and why will they?
Well, you're absolutely right. The Dutch government, the current government, is using Brexit as an excuse to abolish dividend tax and to lower corporate profit tax. This will cost Dutch society 5 billion euros. And it's on a false excuse. It's claiming Brexit. And there's a serious risk here that if the UK leaves and starts, let's say, a war on lower standards of worker protection, lower standards of environmental protection, and lower corporate tax, that the EU will respond and that you get in this serious race to the bottom. And why am I hopeful? Because the current Theresa May government doesn't hold a majority. Because you see desertions all the time there. Because they've lost over 12 votes already on Brexit. And they have promised there will be a final vote in British Parliament. So I discussed this with Jeremy, and I think Labour is in a perfect position to amend any Brexit bill and make sure that no deal can be there if there's no measures against tax avoidance. So what we should do, we should build a coalition of progressives, parties on the left, from the EU side, and argue that from the EU side this has to be in any deal, and Labour can do the same from the Labour side. And this can actually be crucial in making sure that Brexit is not going to lead in a further race to the bottom. And I believe we can stop this. The best scenario, of course, would be for Brexit to not happen. The second best...
But this sounds good.
The second best would be for Theresa May, who has a pajama party now with her cabinet, trying to figure out what they actually want, to just quit and have a Labour government in place, which have a good deal.
I just have a picture now of Theresa May in her pajamas. Thank you very much, Lodewijk Asscher.
I'm really sorry about it, but
this is a great night.
I think reality is even worse.
It is, maybe.
Because she will be there in her pajamas with Boris Johnson. Picture that.
Stop this now. Is the stance of Jeremy Corbyn and Labour on Brexit so clear? Because a lot of people say how they look at Brexit isn't all that clear. It isn't all that clear we are against it. You say now there should be a deal, maybe it'll change, maybe there won't even be a Brexit like we expect now. But Labour's stance on Brexit hasn't always been very clear.
No, that's true. And I've discussed this with Jeremy because from our point of view, it's just such a huge mistake. But you have to realize that for Labour to win a general election, you cannot just say the Remain voters were right. You need to understand why people voted Leave and why they were tricked in voting actually against their own interest. Car factories were going to leave. So I think it's more intelligent, and I think that's the course Labour is taking to make sure that any deal will keep jobs, will be social, instead of just arguing for something which is already, the referendum has taken place. So from our perspective, we would just want to stop Brexit. But I understand what Labour is doing, and I sincerely hope they will be successful because it's in the interest of the whole of Europe.
A question I asked of Jeremy Corbyn also: how in Holland will you reach, I call them the masses? There's a lot of people in this country who are maybe a victim of maybe globalization, maybe of all this tax avoidance, maybe of all the big money going to the people who have the big money already. How can you reach them with this story? It's an easier story to say, we just blame the foreigners, the asylum seekers, the Muslims, the left, the whatever. That's an easier picture to bring across. How will you reach these people who are at this moment victims of globalization and all these things?
I think there's also an underestimation of voters in Europe and in the Netherlands. I think if you look at the current Dutch government, they decided to abolish dividend tax for 1.4 billion euros. It was in no election program, was in no manifesto. There were no reasons.
But it was somewhere in the deep body of Mark Rutte.
Yes.
There it was.
So picture that.
Somewhere in his vezels, which I don't know the English word for.
Yeah, it was like a fiber
Fiber, thank you very much.
Yeah.
You should eat more fiber. That's true. That's true.
But you should never base a religion on those fibers. And this is what's happening with this dividend tax. And there's something very interesting. Because it's not just the left saying you shouldn't do this. There's really a growing anger among the Dutch electorate that we're being tricked in paying a lot of money, which is very necessary for our teachers and nurses and our police officers. We are tricked in paying this money to a very limited number of multinational corporations. So I think this time around they will not get away with it. And actually this discussion will not go away, and I'm convinced that if we make a lot of noise, we can actually stop this from happening and make sure that this money is invested in your future.
Thank you. And let's be honest, thank you. In this case, it's just a good thing that the biggest party of Holland, the VVD, has integrity in its fiber. Well, he worked with them, I didn't. I'm having a great night. Is there a question for Lode? There's a question here, please.
Yes, I want to ask a question in relation to the progressiveness of taxation. Robert Reich is talking about it for many, many years after his time being a Secretary of Labor in the United States, that we should go back to the system of the 70s, when the higher taxes were at the level of 70–80% for those making money out of extracting money from society. And now we see what happens. They have the money, they don't use it, and there is poverty all over. There is this idea worked out by a group of people from the labor organization here in the Netherlands, FNV, and they are advocates for basic income. Yeah, and basic income is a way to reduce poverty for the people at the...
What is your question?
My question
I follow
is,
you. What is your question?
Why don't we go back to the progressive taxation system? Because now we have 50–52% as the highest tax. Well, we give it to those people extracting money from society, and they don't use it to invest it again in society. So that's my question. What is the position of VVD for it?
Fair point. I think a progressive tax system is by far more just than flat taxes as our current government is proposing. So yes, we propose a 60% tax rate for people with a higher income. But make no mistake, we should not be fooled into believing that could solve the problem. Because if we accept that actually capital isn't taxed, then it's an ever smaller group that will pay all the taxes, will pay for the welfare state. And right now, we need redistribution. That's a hard one, even worse than fiber. Redistribution from capital, from the big corporations, also from the big tech firms, to make sure that we will pay for education for a new generation. So yes, I'm all for a progressive tax system. We proposed a 60% thing, but that will not get us the money we really need to invest in society. Therefore, we need to get after the big multinationals.
Everything that happens in tax avoidance, the lawyers, the companies, even some politicians say, it isn't illegal, so we can do it. We are not against the law. We are not going through the law. It's not illegal. We are allowed. The loopholes are there. If this is the law, it's the law.
Now you really sound like a VVD'er.
I try to.
Because it's not just if the rules do not explicitly forbid it, that it's also morally right.
But then it's a moral question. It's not a legal question.
Yes.
Shouldn't we make it into a legal question so that it's not possible anymore to go into these loopholes?
Yes, we should change the laws. Yes, we need in Europe one tax system which makes sure there's no escape. Yes, we should fight those trying to break the laws. But that's not enough. Politics is not just about the rules. It's not just about management. It is about morale. And the morale is this. If you make a lot of money, if you are bright enough to invent something great, enjoy it. You know, build a villa and have a swimming pool. But have this corporation pay, redistribute, make sure that new ideas can be brought. So yes, it's a question of what is just and what is just in society. And just in society is not just claiming all the money, start a trustee and you know, hand out little things to the poor. No, it's just if it's redistributed and if you make sure that everybody can benefit. And that's why I do like the Labour slogan, for the many, not the few.
Another question.
Mr. Asher.
Yeah. We have about 2 minutes here left on stage and then the band is back. Is there a question there?
Yeah. So what I remember from Jeremy Corbyn is that he said don't blame immigrants. So how do you see that call when you just announced 3 days after the party conference of the PvdA 2 weeks ago that we should change Labour Party policies towards immigrants?
And where did I blame any immigrants?
So you said we need to save social security system.
Exactly. Where did I blame immigrants?
So basically then you're saying, so if we have too many immigrants, then our social security system will rot away.
So you're interpreting my words to just criticize the fact that...
So I do. So I say, if you agree with Corbyn, don't blame the immigrants, can you maybe explain, so where are your policies different from him?
Sure.
I see it as a clear change, and I think a lot of people see it the same way.
I think that's framing in a way that's not really fair to what I've been proposing. And I'm very happy to explain this. I think if you look at migration, we shouldn't do more to make sure that people are safe, that people do not drown in the Mediterranean, and that we should do more to prevent war, conflicts, and inequality, because that's what causes migration. And I think nobody should think that migration is such a nice thing. Most of the time, people really don't want to leave their homes. So that's the first. That's not something you hear from the right. Last night, I was in Parliament debating that we should help raise the 4 billion euros desperately needed UNHCR has won for hunger again in the camps where people are safe. And yes, I've also said that any welfare state needs borders. Any welfare state can only be contained with borders and with some forms of control on migration. And that's not so controversial. Actually, Jeremy Corbyn has said the same thing in British Parliament. I also said something else last night, that I do not feel at home when parties on the left blame each other for not being morally superior enough. But there's something I fear more than that, and that's the language we hear now from Italy, which is dehumanizing, which is dehumanizing Roma people, migrants, refugees, talking in terms of the water management we like so much in the Netherlands, tsunamis, floods, etc. I never do that. I think we should be sincere in that you need to be able to discuss that you need borders in a welfare state, but that would never mean that you have no responsibility to help people to security, to never send them back to danger. So I will have any discussion with any of you on my point of view on how to manage this migration, but I will never accept being framed as from the right. And we should not do that to each other. We can have a much more serious discussion and help more people. Thank you.
And last question. Would you be able to show people the opposite? Would you be able to show people, I mean the Dutch people, that it's not the maybe a few thousand or whatever it is, asylum seekers that might end up here, that's not what the enemy is, that's not even Brussels, but that is somewhere else, that is where all the money is going, what we're talking about tonight, the tax avoidance, the big companies, etc. And the globalization, that is where part of their problem comes from, and not from these groups and things I mentioned.
I think once you get into a serious conversation on migration, most people in the Netherlands say, yes, of course we want to help people in need.
Yeah.
We don't want to lose control, but of course we want to help people in need. That's a Dutch tradition. And when you continue that conversation and see that we could invest so much more in education, in affordable housing, in our healthcare system, if we were not just being blackmailed by the big corporation, then we're once again one big family who believe in the same values. And that's why I engage in that conversation, because if we avoid it, we just get hammered by the right and have people, infected by fear and hatred.
You see it as blackmailing by the corporations, by the multinationals.
Absolutely. Make no mistake, a corporation that threatens to go to your neighboring country and does the same in that neighboring country and benefits from it, no normal SME could do that. No normal corporation or family business could do that.
Most of us even have to pay taxes. I mean, not all of them, but most people here just pay taxes.
It's incredible, isn't it?
I don't know about you, but I do.
Yeah, I would love to have a deal like them, but it's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
Because if we try to blackmail them, they say, okay, bye-bye.
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 Bye.
And that's exactly the message they should give next time. Bye-bye, but don't try anywhere else in Europe because we're together here.
And that's why we need European law about this.
There you go. For the many, not the few. Thank you
very much. Lodewijk Asscher. Jazeker wel. Dames en heren, ik kondig u de band aan. Zij gaan een liedje spelen, daarna gaan we door. Hierna komt Paul Mason. He is an award-winning journalist, broadcaster and author. And he's going to speak and I'm going to talk to him. And we're going to go on in this debate. And the microphones will be around if you should want to react in any way. Mag ik een warm welkom voor King Miles. met audio. Ja, daar zijn we weer. Vrienden en vriendinnen, we're back. This is what we are. We are back. Thank you very much. King Miles, they'll be back for another song a bit later. Ladies and gentlemen, I know the atmosphere is great. Beer is flowing and stuff. Would you please come maybe closer to the stage again? If you're on the top level, you could come down. There's a little room here because some people of Team Corbyn have left the building to fly away. So you can come closer. There's no danger. There's beer here. If anybody wants a beer, there's a lot of beer here. And you can come closer. If you're still with us on the internet, it's good that you're still with us. And I'll be talking just for a short while until everybody shuts the fuck up and I can introduce the next speaker on this stage. Yes, we're back at the Paard in The Hague. And yes, thank you very much. I go and see a lot of bands in venues like this, and there's always about 800 people listening to the band. There's always about 8 people just talking very loud through the band. And I never want to kill anybody, but then I want to kill them because they're always standing around me. But thank you very much for being so quiet and a warm audience. It's always great to be in The Hague. Ladies and gentlemen, can I have a warm welcome for, I called him an award-winning journalist, a broadcaster and an author. And I did that because he is. Can I have a warm welcome for Paul Mason? Yes.
Well, hello. Just like an English crowd after the main act, the bar fills up. I just want to apologise for one thing. That it was a lot of men on this stage speaking, and so far not so many women. Hopefully next year there'll be more women. And here's, I didn't set the thing up, but here's why. We don't own the Me Too movement. It's a movement across society, but it is one of the most powerful movements for change that you will see in your lifetime. We will own the task of defending it as the right-wing backlash against it builds, and I'm going to talk a bit about that. Now, about me, I was a TV journalist, and on the 15th of September 2008, I was standing on Fifth Avenue, New York, outside Lehman Brothers building, and I saw the era of neoliberalism effectively end. People walk out of that bank with their belongings, knowing they knew more than we did, that the whole system was in danger. Since then, we saved the system. We kept the system on life support to what is now $20 trillion worth of quantitative easing and some taxation and some spending in the world. We stimulated the economy and we kept capitalism on life support, but you can't keep an ideology on life support. The human brain demands coherence, and the problem with the system we've lived with for the last 10 years, it is not logical. The theory tells them the state should be small. It should not intervene into the economy. The market is the best regulator of anything. The market blew itself up. The state saved capitalism. The ideology is dying. Now, there's a choice. And the choice is you can carry on. You can carry on enriching, yes, maybe the middle classes and some urbanized people in the developing world, and you can enrich the 1%, and you can say to your own working class and your lower middle class in the developed world, here in the Netherlands, in Britain, in Poland, even in Poland, in Hungary, you get nothing from this system, but there's no alternative. That's how the elites of Europe reacted at first, and of America. But unfortunately, there is an alternative, and it's not a nice one. We heard a bit about it then. National, xenophobic, authoritarian, right-wing capitalism. No, it's not a return to the 1930s in one sense. It's not a statized form of capitalism. I call it Trump, Brexit, Viktor Orban's capitalism, Thatcherism in one country. That's what it is. It's the attempt to do neoliberalism, free market economics, impoverishing people, but in your own country, going it alone from what? The thing that Donald Trump stood there, sat there with his arms folded and said no to. A rules-based international order. You're living through potentially the death of a rules-based international order. It's not a pleasant thing to think about. You can do that, or you can head down the route that Trump, Salvini, the Brexit politicians in Britain have headed down, of national authoritarian capitalism. What comes with it is not just economics. Violent misogyny, attempts to rip up abortion rights, racism, Islamophobia, and anti-Semitism. In Britain, our far right, UKIP, for years hid mainly behind the anti-Islam. Islam is polluting our culture. Now, because it's losing support and lots of fascists are joining it, now you start to see, and the person bringing all the migrants in is George Soros, Jewish financier. It's coming back. Your grandparents lived through it, but we can defeat it. And I think I want to talk about how. The first thing we need to defeat it with is a different vision of the economy. An economy based on growth here in the developed world, not just growth in China and the emerging markets, of prosperity for you, for prosperity for the small towns of the Netherlands, of Britain, of France and Germany. Social mobility in your lifetime, not social mobility for your children. Yes, that too. But you get better. Your life improves, like my father and mother's life improved in the 30 glorious years of growth after the war. Respect at work. If you want to understand the anger that many working class people and low paid people take with them throughout every day, it is the lack of respect that they enjoy at work. They can be bullied, insulted, treated like a number, treated like a machine. We don't have to put up with that. And that vision of growth, prosperity, high wages, high value economy, high technology, high respect at work, it's really easy to communicate to somebody who has not had their mind completely polluted by this racist authoritarianism. And even to them, as we're now finding out with Brexit, you can't eat xenophobia. Xenophobia does not bring an extra factory or a new car model into the BMW. It takes the BMW factory away. You cannot eat Islamophobia. You cannot eat anti-Semitism. Even for those ones who really believe it, we have a material way of convincing them, I think, to step back from the terrible project to which they are committed. What is the risk that the European centre runs? It's a huge risk, I would argue, that Merkel, Juncker, Rutte, Macron are running. The risk is, first of all, that Trump succeeds, that President Trump gets a second term. Why? America's economy is booming because Trump has no Maastricht Treaty, Trump has no Lisbon Treaty. He will borrow and borrow and borrow. And as Yanis Varoufakis pointed out a couple of weeks ago, not only does he spend on his friends, the bankers and the casino tycoons, the mafiosi, he signs off, yes, every welfare program that the Democrats ask for. Trump is creating jobs. Nightmare number one, for some countries, nationalist authoritarian economics works for a while. But there's a deeper nightmare that we here in Europe must address ourselves to as we see these pictures of children jailed, caged in America, and as we see Salvini turning away the refugee boat in the Mediterranean. I visited the Majdanek concentration camp this year. It's always stunning to visit one of the concentration camp museums. But what I thought as I looked at it, how low-tech Auschwitz, Birkenau, Majdanek were. They were low technology. It's wire, concrete, wood, and violence. If they do it again to us, it will be Guantanamo. It will be closed-circuit television. It will be tags on your arms and legs. It will be eyeball recognition. If you want to play and take the risk of handing to the far right and the authoritarian nationalists power, momentum, control in Europe, you are taking a much bigger risk than you think. So we on the left have to do two things. We have to convince our friends and colleagues in the centre of politics that we are not the enemy. Get used to it. If you want to do what you did in the 1930s, crush the left and open the door to the right, you know where it ends up. Because this is not a happy world. This is not a happy planet. Mr. Juncker, Mark Rutte, we need to not take that risk. Where possible, ally with us to fight for humane, decent refugee and migration policies. Where possible, rethink the Lisbon and Maastricht treaties, and go down the route of a high-growth society. But to finish on this, we need a vision quick. Because it's not just America and Italy where the far right are setting the agenda. In the European election next year, your main worry might be that the centre wins, that the conservative parties win. Well, look what's happening to Merkel's party. It's fragmenting. Look what happened to the Austrian Conservative Party. It moved to the right. The real danger, on top of us losing, is that the right win the election. So I want to float an idea. I've given up with demands, but I want to float an idea. Red, red, green might happen in Germany. If the two left parties and the Greens have to save Merkel, I think they should, personally. That's because this time they will have a say in what that coalition does. But red, red, green can save Europe. And we need to start demonstrating that to our European colleagues in the election. Here's my suggestion. We run a red, red, green Spitzenkandidat. And the red, red, green Spitzenkandidat has to be a very persuasive person who can speak to all the Greens, the far left, the progressive nationalist parties, and to social democracy. And if we did that, I think there's enough progressive people in Europe to win. Now, what would that do? To no longer have the tax-avoiding, corruption-encouraging type of person in charge of Europe, but one of us. What Corbyn has done, let me say this and finish on it. What Corbyn did more than anything else to the British electorate was he showed them literally another world is possible, where a social democratic party almost campaigns against its past. It's tough to do. We were wrong, guys. We did let you down, and now we're going to do something right. This was a dramatic moment in British politics, and I think if the whole wide left in Europe, had the confidence to offer the European electorate one choice, neoliberalism, racist nationalism, or the future, they would choose it. Thank you. Thank you. Now I get to display my fashion.
Paul Mason, listen to this. I listened to the whole speech, but the second half you were talking about camps and about things that happened in history and things that could happen. Yep. I wrote down, "Are you afraid?" And just 2 minutes later, I wrote down, "Are you hopeful?" What is the main thing? Are you afraid of what is happening and what could happen, or are you hopeful what will or might happen?
I am afraid that people don't realise how bad it can and how quickly bad it can get. But when
Is this on?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm afraid that even people in this room, even people who've studied politics, aren't allowing themselves to think how bad it can get, how quickly. But when I see, the victory in Mexico, Jeremy referred to, the victory in the primaries in the Democratic Party of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, these are not maneuvers. These are the products of ordinary people opening their doors and saying, yes, I like that. I like progressive left-wing politics. So I think we also have the most educated generation we've ever had in human history. That's got to be a plus point for us, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I think, don't you?
Yeah, when I look around, yeah, you could be right.
With some exceptions.
Is there any question for... yes, there's a question there, please. Are you reading it? Are you reading it from your phone?
No, I'll read it from my memory.
No, you can read it from your phone. All the rappers do.
Paul, I want to thank you for your words on social mobility, income inequality, and economic prosperity. But what I don't understand is that I think both you and Jeremy know that all of that is going to get 10 times worse with Brexit happening. So I want to understand why you nor Jeremy do not support a vote on the final Brexit deal. Okay. A referendum on the final Brexit deal. Yeah. Please explain that to me. I don't get it.
I do support a vote on the final Brexit deal, first of all, but
why not Jeremy? I don't get it.
No, he doesn't rule it out. And let me explain to you what the position is. In Britain, the British constitutional system is that Parliament is sovereign. Okay, so we have to be able to defeat, and I think if you see this proposal that comes out tomorrow to the British Parliament, it's a really defeatable proposal. It will fall apart at the first contact with Brussels anyway. We have to defeat that in Parliament. when there is a proposal, I am in favour of taking that to the British people. But and Jeremy hasn't ruled it out. The argument in Britain, let me be really clear, the people in our party who don't like Jeremy's politics and were responsible for the Iraq War and for a neoliberal economic policy, and, I'm sorry, for the bank crisis as well, they would like us to become the Remain party. Now, unfortunately, the Remain party is going to lose any election because Britain is a country full of people who believe in, imperial glory, colonialism, and they are Eurosceptic. That's our position. Working class town I come from voted 70 or 80% for Brexit and 70 or 80% for us. Now, we can't disown them. We can't say, but you're all stupid, which is what the liberal intelligentsia says. You're all stupid. You can't read. You're just fools. No, that's just not going to happen. So I think what we've done is Theresa May hasn't made it easy because she's never put down a real position. She will have to between now and October, the ECO. But as she does it, we need to take the Brexit voting progressive people, and I'm sorry these people exist, through the argument of what is possible. And I think it's entirely possible that we end up in a Norway-style or Swiss-style arrangement with Europe, which, remember, we had already, unfortunately, Cameron had already secured an end to ever closer union from the European Union itself. So we're not talking about status quo. I understand your question, and I understand the frustration that European socialists have with the fact that we have an electorate that is very Eurosceptic. We think that by giving them economic answers and being very robust on the ideological and political issues of democracy and xenophobia, we can bring them back. That is our task.
Why did so many working class people in England vote against their own interest?
Well, here's the thing. 27% of Asian people voted for Brexit. 18% of black people voted for Brexit. I can tell you who they were because they were the same white people. They were taxi drivers, cleaners, security guards. They felt it was never explained to them on what basis 3 million European citizens had come to the country. Because in Britain, because of Thatcherism, the only form of redistribution left in Britain is the public services. The tax system doesn't redistribute. There's no good. Wages are terrible. They're poor. So the one thing you've got going for you is you have access to school and hospital. And we have answers to our colleagues as to, well, why are they coming? And they can, if you've got a kid, you go to the front of the queue in the doctors. And I don't have a kid, so why? We have answers, but our party never gave the answers. And the problem is because the party was bifurcated. It was totally supporting the idea of the European Union free movement, fine, good, but then it was putting out mugs saying end immigration, because immigration in Britain means black people, brown people. And the party made mistakes, and we have to live with the mistakes. You can't rectify your mistakes simply by deciding they were mistakes. And there is a huge cultural push to try and legitimize both economic migration and refugees, on which our country is appalling, much worse than your country. But we need to take people with us, and we need to win.
Thank you. One more question. Is there one more question here or somewhere for Paul? Yeah, it could be anywhere. There. Yes, there's a question there. I'm coming. If you stay here, I'll go there, and we'll just see what happens. There's a question here, all the way in the back. Thank you. I'll hold this.
I'm Eric, and I'm a social economist. And I want to tell a small story. It will be short. And then I'll ask you a question.
Go on.
There was a Saint Ambrosius in 800. 800. And when rich people came to him to give money for the poor, he was rather skeptic. He said, it's okay you give money to the poor. But how did you get it anyway? I think we should not look at taxes, but see where they got the money. We have to go deeper. They are stealing, and then we want it back. We should not allow them to steal.
Good.
That sounds good. It wasn't really a question, but it was a short story, so that's good.
Paul,
do you want to react to this with another short story, or should I?
No.
No.
Luke, The $6 trillion of offshore assets, it is the ultimate sign of the failure of the system. It cannot be profitably invested in the technologies of the future, in the human development, people's training and education, because it just sits there. All they want to put it into, when they can think of something, is speculative ventures like Uber, Airbnb, WeWork. Do you have WeWork here? It's $18 billion in back. It owes $18 billion in back rent. This is meant to be the future. So this money must be brought on shore. That's the thing. But once it's there, we also have to empower governments to take bold decisions with global corporations who believe the fiction that you can never tax them. So we need to, the word in English is impute the earnings of Google and Amazon and Facebook in Britain. If they do 20% of their European business in Britain, and we know what the total is, we should be able to say to them, we believe you are making X million a year, and the tax on that is 25%, mate, like everybody else. Cough up. So I think we can do that. But the other part of it, the argument I want to have with European social democracy is this. Taxing is one thing. Spending to multiply the effects of spending so that €1 spent produces 1 or more euros worth of economic growth, prosperity, human development, technological innovation, is something that capitalism has forgot to do because it believes the opposite. It believes if you spend €1 of taxpayers' money, you only get 50 cents worth of growth. We have to convince people that they are wrong, and we have to convince European social democracy to begin believing in borrowing, taxing, and spending. Because, like I said before, Trump has no Maastricht Treaty. He will borrow and he will dump the debt to China, and he will do all kinds of things. Of course, Europe can't do that. But one of the things Jeremy and his colleague John McDonnell have done recently is to say that if we come to power, we'll of course put some heterodox left economists in the Bank of England. It's still a powerful central bank, and we will retask it to not just to keep inflation at 2%, but to keep growth high, to keep employment high, to indeed keep climate change under control. In other words, the central bank is so important in modern capitalism, you can use it. You don't have to nationalize everything or state-run industries. You set norms of behavior and targets for major institutions. And I actually think the European Centre will listen if we put a calm and restrained but workable alternative to the problem, to the system that has run into the ground. More taxation, more spending, more growth. And yes, if you have to, print money, but use it to pump prime growth at the bottom, not the asset price inflation, the yacht, the mansion, the Maserati of the rich. Who can't explain that on the doorstep? Everybody here can explain it. So why don't we take it to the European people and say, it's simple, that's what we're going to do. What do you think?
Thank you. Paul Mason, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That is good. There's more microphone. Paul has one microphone with him. You can hand it to somebody who's coming on just in a minute. I'm going to introduce 4 people to you now. They will tell you who they are, and then we will speak about the subject that we're speaking at tonight. May I have a warm welcome for Derisha Ale Maju. He is working on 5 continents for Global Alliance for Tax Justice. Pervencia Beres, she's a member of European Parliament. Ana Gomez, also a member of European Parliament. And Alex Wilkes, he's a campaign director for Avaz. And they will tell you about what. Could I have a warm welcome for the 4 guests here for a panel discussion. Have a seat and have a microphone, please. There is one more microphone somewhere, I hope. Please, thank you very much. If you would please introduce yourself shortly and tell us where you stand on the subject matters we are speaking about. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And that's the 4th microphone. It's incredible. Yes, it's working. Dames en heren, we zijn weer terug.
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm very happy to be here. I am the executive director of the Global Alliance for Tax Justice. The Global Alliance for Tax Justice is composed of 5 tax justice networks in Europe, Africa, Latin America, Asia, Canada, and the United States. Also a sign that tax justice and tax evasion are global issues and problems. I don't know how to have a long story to tell, and then let me start with some anecdotes, if you allow me. It was about 10 years ago when we started the tax justice campaign globally and in Europe. I was working for an organization called Christian Aid in the UK, and together with another charity in the UK, which was called Action of Churches Together. Christian Aid is a global development agency of UK churches fighting poverty in developing countries. Action Churches Together is a charity in the UK fighting poverty in the UK. So we did a tax justice bus which started in London and went around the UK and came back to London. There were two things we were telling. On one hand, we from Christian Aid were telling the public, a figure now accepted even by OECD, for every $1 going in the form of development aid to developing countries, $3 come back in the form of tax evasion and avoidance and illicit flows. What is the sum of +1 and -3? So is it possible then to do development to fight poverty with -2? That is the situation. Action Church Together fighting in the poverty in the UK, they had another figure. According to the reckoning of the British Revenue Authority, tax dodging annually costs the UK Treasury 35 billion pounds.
Yeah.
The social spending cut of the Tory government was 30 billion pounds. If things were working normally, you will go after tax dodgers and get the tax instead of cutting social spending. That was how we started the campaign.
I will ask you later how we will get things working like that. Please introduce yourself and say how you are in this matter.
Hello, folks. I'm Ana Gomes. I come from Portugal, the great city of Lisbon. And I'm a member of the European Parliament, where I work with Paul Tang, with Udo, with Pervanche, among other things, on fairness in taxation and against money laundering and organized crime that is associated with money laundering. And my country is a country where we are demonstrating that TINA is a fake. That TINA, there is no alternative. There is alternative, and we in the left are demonstrating that there is alternative.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you. My name is Pervenche Berès. I come from France, from another nice city, which is Paris. I'm happy that with Anna we are making maybe Paul Mason happy, because there are two ladies on the stage.
At last, two women. At last.
Two women on the stage. And just to let you know what's my track record in this field. Once I was in the European Parliament, and I won the first vote in favor of a financial transaction tax, which is an ongoing battle, and I think this is also why we need to join all together to make it happen one day.
Thank you.
I'm Alex Wilkes, campaign director with Avaz. I hope some of you have participated in Avaz actions, signing petitions, coming on marches and other things. We're a global civic movement all over the world with about 46 million people involved. And we are working on a whole wide range of issues, from who owns the media to climate change and the rest. And tax evasion and avoidance is one of the key things. And it's an honor to be on the stage with two people who've been fighting so hard and successfully in the European Parliament to take action on this.
Question for you. Are you from a beautiful city? Because they seem all to be from beautiful cities.
That's right, a very beautiful city, slightly less prominent than Lisbon and Paris. It's called Bristol.
Bristol.
In England.
Oh man, come on. Great history, great peer. And we were talking just shortly before I was going to say the show. You called yourself a recovering tax justice person. What is a recovering tax justice person?
Well, I used to work a lot on development finance and, bothering the World Bank and the IMF and other institutions to try and make them fairer, to try and make them care about the environment. And I ran a network in Brussels called the European Network on Debt and Development. So spreadsheets, I ate them for breakfast, lunch and tea, and I was into this stuff in a big way. Now I've broadened my horizons.
And what you do with the platform, I mean, how does it connect to what we are talking about here tonight? I mean, people can be for something or against something. They might even sign up their name or put in their email address or somebody else's email address. What you do? How will it connect to what we are doing here?
Well, it depends. It's different per campaign, but last December, I think it was, 1.1 million people signed a petition for a crackdown on tax havens. We worked with Gordon Brown, who has had a distinguished career in a socialist party in the UK, to deliver that to the G20 and to try and get the Argentinians who are running that process, which the Europeans are very much involved, to take further action on tax evasion. But it differs. In the case of climate change, another issue we work on, we had over 3 million people sign a petition, and about 650,000 people took to the streets of New York, and there were simultaneous demonstrations all over the world in 2014 to try and build up momentum for what turned into the Paris Agreement. And it was a little bit similar because lots of people said at that time, no one cared anymore about climate change. It's an issue like tax justice, which you can discuss, in small circles. But it's not the case, and Avaaz was at the center of showing that people do care and building a political coalition which led to the agreement where every country, including Saudi Arabia and others, which you would think would be impossible, signed up.
Thank you. That's clear. And Gordon Brown, of course, also was a song by the Stranglers. The question for the three of you is the same. We're talking about solution to tax avoidance in Europe. This is what we're talking about. Please tell me, how are we going to achieve this? We know what we're fighting for. We know what we're fighting against. For the three of you, it's the same question. Just in a short way, try to explain how can we get to that situation that there is no more or hardly any tax avoidance in Europe?
Well, we got to get together. We're not going to do it alone, huh? Because just on our own, we will never achieve anything.
Together, as in all European countries together?
Together in all the European countries, but also together with the civil society, with the journalists, with everybody that is aware that this is a pure scandal, with the many. Because if the many don't cry, and I mean, sometimes people think that it's too technical to discuss tax evasion or taxation issue. It's not true. I think people are very much aware of what's happening. That people are cheating and that they have the means to cheat and that they abuse their power to cheat even more. And I think there's an awareness of people that this not goes on. And look, I think in 2008, it's true that we've been rescuing banks. But people, they pretty well know that behind rescuing banks, we did rescue the profit of a few of them. And that not only they were rescued when they were in the origin of the crisis, but they abuse the rescue we gave to them to even make more profit. And this is the reality, because inequality since the crisis have even increased. So this is where, so now I come to your question.
Please do.
What do we have to do? Well, it's very, we will discuss it all together. I'm not going to give you the whole catalog because they have a full range of things to do. But I'm just going to maybe start with one direction where we need to go, which is people have to know where people make their profit. This is a simple thing that is called country-by-country reporting. Please, company, tell us where you make your money so we can know where you need to pay your tax. And this is something we've been voting for in the European Parliament, and now we are still waiting that the Business Europe and all these allies stop blocking the decision by the member state, because the member state very often, and it's not by hazard that we are doing this conference today in this country. Because when Paul Tong told me, well, let's have a together event on tax evasion and on taxation in Netherlands, I think he was fair to propose this, because this country is, of course, one of the countries that is playing the game to avoid and to be clever enough to build complex mechanism to avoid taxation. So this is why one of our main fight is to make sure you have transparency of where the profit is realized. So this is where it needs to be taxed.
Clear, country-by-country reporting. Give me another example or another direction that we might go in.
Another crucial dimension is fighting the anonymity that hides behind shelf companies, that hides behind bearer shares. We need to abolish bearer shares. We need to know who's doing business. A big problem that we have is this whole system of companies that are indeed a system of Russian dolls to obfuscate who is the one owning the assets, owning the profits. And that's exactly how they make the system work via the tax havens.
So
but the tax havens, let me just tell you, are not that only those far away in Paradise Islands.
They're
they
here.
are here.
They're here.
They are here in
Although
Europe.
in Dutch Parliament, I think we were not allowed. We were actually not allowed to call Holland a tax haven because there were parties very angry about this.
Yeah, but let me tell you, the Netherlands is actually the tax haven for Portugal. You know that in the middle of the crisis... When
Do you mean Cristiano Ronaldo has a bank account here?
Probably. and you know, he has some guys doing funny jobs for him in taxation. He was just condemned in
I know.
Spain for that.
I love
but
football.
Actually, the problem, in the middle of the crisis, when we were under the austerity measures because all the money was going, when we were being overtaxed, and we still are, by the way, and when the pensions and salaries were being cut, and all that money was being put into saving the banks, at that time, 16 of the 20 stock exchange listed companies in Portugal had the headquarters here in the Netherlands. And you know why? Not just not to be taxed at the levels that were required in Portugal, but actually to pay less tax, so 15% as corporate tax here, or even less if they had a sweetheart deal behind the table, but actually in order not to have to declare the proceeds of all the business they would do in faraway places. For instance, in Ethiopia, the country of our friend here.
That's where we're going
and
now.
And of course, that's why...
Stop.
Let me say one thing.
Stop.
That's why, as Pervenche was saying, we need to stay together in Europe, and we need Europe to make the difference at the global level. This is a fight at the global level.
Yes. And very important, we need to listen to the moderator internationally. Internationally,
okay,
you work on 5 continents.
Yes.
We are talking about Europe. We're talking about this country.
Okay, allow me to
I see 3 fingers. I doubt it. Come on, tell me.
I have 3 points. Actually, tax dodging tricks are so primitive. The mechanisms used are so easy to detect. I have no time to explain. Just Google today. What does the Irish double and Dutch sandwich mean?
Yeah, the Irish double Dutch sandwich. It
Yes.
sounds like a strange sexual behavior, but it is actually tax evasion.
It is a very easy thing. But
I know.
Let me give you 2 examples why I want us to complicate it more. If you have looked at the election campaign in the US, the presidential debate between Hillary Clinton and Trump,
yeah,
he was saying tax dodging is what smart people do. He was saying, I love loopholes. It did not cost him votes, apparently. Okay? I have another example. In Switzerland, there was a referendum asking people if the tax gap between the average salary and top salary could be reduced to 12-fold. 12-fold. 60% of the Swiss people said no. So what does this mean?
Said what?
No.
They were against lowering this difference.
No, they said it should not be capped. It has to be exponential if it were. What does this tell us? It tells us the narrative which has to be defeated is a precondition to also come to tax reforms. There is There is a narrative dominating societies where fairness and solidarity are retreating. Number one. Number two, it's about looking at it not from individual national perspective. You know, race to the bottom, Lagarde said it, the IMF director. In a race to the bottom, everybody will be at the bottom.
In a race to the bottom, everybody will be at the bottom.
At the bottom. And I'll give you an example. Now, you cannot clean your house. There was an immoral thing happening until the end of the last century in Europe. For example, in Germany, where I lived, companies paying bribes in Africa could claim it as a return on their tax payments in Germany. If we also treat tax evasion, let them do it elsewhere, and we leave the door open for them, facilitating tax evasion elsewhere, and allowing it to happen elsewhere and trying to correct it here cannot happen. So cooperation in international tax matters is very important, because when we are campaigning against this practice, what were the German government telling us? If we don't do it, we lose the competition to France. If we don't do it, we lose the competition to the Dutch. So this competition between the third point, last point I want to mention is, I am tired as a civil society activist, a tax justice activist, I'm tired of these half-hearted solutions being presented. It is trying to stop loopholes with a sieve. That is what is happening in the form of what OECD is doing, what the European Commission sometimes. You know, if you reduce this to the least common denominator, you will leave it with loopholes. And Trump will tell you, I love loopholes. Tax dodgers will always tell you, I have loopholes. We will never be able to close it. Thank you.
Very clear. What I want to do is this. Thank you very much. I want to bring on one more speaker, and I'd like you to react to what she's saying. We're talking international stuff. We're talking tax evasion in this country, and we're talking tax evasion in Europe. Esme Berghout is here. She's from Oxfam Novib, NGO working from, well, just down the road here in The Hague, actually working in a lot of countries. She will say something about this subject also, and I would like you to react to what she has to say. Dus Esme Berghout van Oxfam Novib, met ook een microfoon. Wow, prachtig. Kosten nog moeite gespaard.
I hope it works. Does it work? Yeah.
And I hope it works.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It's been a really interesting and inspiring evening so far, and I've been listening really closely. I think a lot has been said already this evening about why we need more fair taxation. It is because we're dealing with an inequality crisis, and that unfair tax rules are contributing to rising inequality within as well as between countries. And it's putting a stop on the poverty reduction efforts, and it's leading to insecurity for so many people around the globe, and it needs to be addressed. I would also like to really emphasize that we've got a lot of success to celebrate. Thanks to whistleblowers, thanks to campaigning, thanks to efforts of many years now by politicians as well to stop tax avoidance. We have seen Europe work on a blacklist of tax havens. We've seen stronger rules against profit shifting to tax havens. We see anti-abuse rules in tax treaties. It's to try to avoid abuse through or making use of tax treaties, which especially for developing countries is really important. And we've seen moves towards this transparency for public companies to have to publicly report on where they do the business and where they pay their taxes. Now we need to continue the fight. We do not want to be dependent on whistleblowers. You need the public, the general citizens, to have this information. So indeed, the fight for public country-by-country reporting has to continue. Companies need to be asked to report publicly on where they're active and where they pay their taxes. We need the EU to get serious about dealing with tax havens, not only black or grey list third countries, but really look at the European Union and the tax haven countries within there. We need more inclusive global tax governance. It's problematic to see that those governments that have a big say in the EU and also in the global tax rules are those countries that are causing some of these really big problems and are playing major roles as tax havens. And it doesn't make it really easier to hold other tax havens to account and to solve that issue. For this, we need more transparent governance. You don't need just companies to be more transparent on their taxes and their activities, but also governments on the rules and why they take the decisions that they take, like why is the Dutch withholding tax abolished? but also why are some countries blacklisted or grey-listed, and what do they need to do to get off the list? And that kind of transparency lacks now from the EU Code of Conduct group. And I really like the point, Reggie, that you made last, which is about tackling the narrative. There's this narrative, this ideology that competition between countries is good. That competition via corporate tax rules is good, but it's not good. It's leading to this race to the bottom. And as you said, this will leave all countries at the bottom.
Esme, one question from me for you. If you look at developing countries, a lot of countries where Oxfam or Oxfam Nova is working, how big is the problem? We know that there's a lot of big companies and multinationals working in these countries, maybe producing clothes or getting the oil or whatever. How big, I mean, financially, how much money isn't going to countries where it should go if there was fair taxation?
There's the estimate that developing countries lose about $100 billion per year because of tax avoidance by large multinationals. If you look at individual countries, there was a campaign recently in Kenya where they said the tax breaks given to large companies are 3 times as big as what the government is spending on public free primary education.
Somebody really got a fright from that last sentence. I don't know what happened. I mean, it is a lot of money, but come on. So we're talking about 100 billion, which is 100 miljard euro, have it over.
Yeah.
And that countries could, I mean, if the money came into the countries by fair taxation, they could use that. Then a lot of people say these countries, or quite a few of these countries, don't have a tax system. They don't have the blue envelope that we have. They don't have the office, so they can't get that money into their system.
Well, that's of course not true. Of course, they have tax authorities, and in many countries those need to be strengthened. And also in that we see some progress and more support also from the international community to strengthen those tax authorities. So yes, improvements are needed there, but that at the same time you need to stop this tax avoidance.
Thank you. Could you react, maybe one of you or all of you, to what we're talking about here? Because we're talking about this country, like I said, and I'm talking about Europe, but also about a global problem and the connections with the so-called developing world. Yes?
Yes, we should realize that actually much of the money that is siphoned off from the developing countries is actually laundered through our countries. And it's quite outrageous that our governments allow that to happen, and our financial system allows that to happen. That's why the role of whistleblowers working in this industry has been so important to expose all that. And that's why Panama Papers demonstrated that indeed it's not just about...
There are political parties who are in favor of this because they say it's just a system, it works.
But it is
and there
wrong.
are parties who are just not interested.
It's unfair, it's indecent, and it even puts in question our global security and our national and individual security. And I'll tell you, that's exactly what Panama Papers were so important, because they added to the... we have done, you can read our inquiry, our report on the LuxLeaks scandal, which was about taxation and this tax jungle. Our member states competing with each other in this race to the bottom. And it's actually quite outrageous, because in the end we all end up in the bottom, and this totally undermines. I mean, we talk about single market and fair competition. How can there be fair competition if we are undermining each other in taxation? If small and medium companies pay more 30% tax than big corporations, according to the Commission. This is unfairness, this is indecent. But let me add one more thing. It's one more thing. We need this indeed at the European level with a tax harmonization. But this really undermines our security. And Panama Papers demonstrated that, because they show the same tax haven system and the same money laundering system actually enables all sorts of criminals. And you know, one of the measures that the Commission has proposed, and the same member states who always block any movement on the tax harmonization in the EU, any attempt to indeed make it fair, the same have been opposing this proposal by the Commission. And you know what it is? It's a reform of the VAT system that now brings about 50 billion euros per year deviated from the coffers of the EU and our member states into organized crime mafias, including terrorist groups like Daesh and Al-Qaeda. This is demonstrated including by a Dutch journalist who did a fantastic investigation on that. That could be easily close this gap, which is called carousel fraud, which is deviating this money. It's about 1/3 of the budget of the EU. Can you believe the difference this would make for sound policies, redistributive policies within the EU to indeed enable our citizens? And we are giving this money to organized crime and terrorists. It cannot go on.
2 questions. 1, is she always like this? 2, if this is the case, if this is, like you say, researched and we know this is happening, why is this not changing? We're talking about fairness. Why is the European Parliament not strong enough to change these practices? Maybe you should go to work.
That's a good question, huh? She's always like this, and I'm always like this, and we go on. I mean, we are the undisciplined members of the group.
I love it.
So maybe this is why we've been invited to Netherlands, which is a country where sometimes we are told that you should respect all the rules. Huh? Now, let me tell you 2 things. We have a drama here, because member states, they believe that the core element of their sovereignty as a state is about taxation. Exactly, and it's the same issue, historical issue, as on terrorism. What is the tool for fight against terrorism is about information and secret services to follow the terrorist. And in the globalized world, this is maybe their 2 last tools they believe they could keep for themselves. And they believe that if you share information about your taxation regime and your list of taxed people and blah, 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 you're going to betray your secret and you're going to damage your competition capacity. When it's all the contrary in a modern world. Because we are no more in a world where you have a factory, where you can go and find out what has been coming out from this factory and tax it. This is not the modern world. But the member state, they still believe we are in the 19th century, where they can, say what they can say from the old world. And they don't want to go to this new world, because in this new world, they will have to share a bit more of power. So this is why in the parliament, we are able to cross, of course we have fight against the conservative, because they always say, they don't even dare now to say that they are against what we are saying. But when it comes to concrete detail, they limit the scope, they limit the rate, and they do exception. This is the way they try to do it. But there's one thing I want to say also, that among member states, there's a capture by big companies. Listed company, they have a capture for the power in our different capital. And what do? They threat them. They tell them, if you don't give us this taxation rate, we will go outside. This is the way it works. And the final thing I just also want to mention is, because now we are in this terrible situation where you can see a kind of a race to the bottom among member states. But tax haven, they don't do it like this. They do a cartel. This is something we have found out, which is very interesting, because you could say, if they would do the race to the bottom to capture, they would have a competition, and in the end, maybe there would be only one tax haven that would...
But they work together.
They work together in a cartel, so everybody has its own specialty. One goes for the fish, for the ships, one goes for the airplane, the other one go for the Dutch sandwich, the other go for the Irish blah blah. They have their own method, and they don't compete each other. So rich people, they can choose all the loophole organized by the different tax havens.
One question for you. How can you use your power with more than 40 million people who follow you and who react to what you put online? How can you use that power to get to a system which is more fair and more equal?
Well, as the title of the whole evening suggests, we have to do this together. It's not just one organization, one MEP, nor indeed one political family. We have to reach across, and we have to realize that our democracy is under such threat. and so many things we hold dear, whether it's our education system, our health system, our ability to speak out and have free speech, and the rest of it are under such deep threat that we have to work together. We have to realize that the bedrock of our democracy and our society is fair taxation, and that has to be a core principle. We have to bring more people out at all the elections coming, particularly the one next May, and not be complacent and think that what we know and will have known for generations, decades in Europe will remain. I thought the video at the beginning was very powerful. To realize that this system of tax evasion and avoidance is a cancer at the very heart of our democracy. It allows autocrats and kleptocrats to take power. And one example from the Netherlands is that Kazakh kleptocrats, or people widely alleged to be Kazakh kleptocrats, siphoned money from the state in Kazakhstan through the Netherlands, through shell companies, to people very close to Donald Trump. And Zembla did a fantastic documentary about this. And maybe one of the reasons why Donald Trump was able to pick himself up from bankruptcy and challenge for the White House and be there now is partly because he was able to get dirty money through shell companies in the Netherlands. This is a very, very serious threat to our democracy. Many of us have to come together, get out there with the messages that this has to stop. And we are making progress, as Esme and others have said. There's a lot more to do. We need to get out there, but it can be done.
Thank you very much. That is a clear statement. Thank you very much. Final words, please.
No, actually, I thought I will not be left out.
Oh, no, never.
Okay, two things really to the last question Esme raised. About this capacity thing to collect taxes and what. I want to say two things. One is, you may know this ideology from the US. What is good for General Motors is good for America. I don't think what is good for your multinational companies is good for the world. I'll give you an example. There was a study and ActionAid did in Ghana in which it showed that Saab Miller International, a company making beer in Ghana, paid less taxes than a woman selling beer in the kiosk. So
the woman selling beer paid more taxes than the company making the beer.
Saab Miller International. True. That is the situation. So why am I saying this? Because there is this thing of trying to blame revenue losses in developing countries on capacity and what. And I had a rhetorical question. I had a slot at the UN speaking on this topic. And I said, Mr. Chairman, if I'm being beaten up, is your priority to send me to a bodybuilding training or to stop the beating? So the issue is now for Europe to tame its companies, which is evading and avoiding taxes, and not to be shelter of. I'll give you last example, honestly.
I love it.
Last example. We had such a meeting in Germany. You know, according to the Financial Secrecy Index, Germany is number 9 on that index. If you look at the index, it reverses the Transparency International Corruption Perception Index. The dirtiest countries which are clean on that one become dirty when it comes to financial secrecy. And that issue was, where are the monies from Mubarak, Abacha, Ben Ali? And the guy from the Ministry of Finance answered a very interesting question. He said, but these are hidden because this anonymity is not allowed for German citizens, but it is allowed for foreigners doing it in Germany. Why is it happening? And he said, you know, when some Arabic names are transcribed in Latin, they can have 10 different names. This is an excuse, a ridiculous one. And I had to ask him, do they also travel with 10 passports? So you have as civil society, as leftist political parties, you should go away from this ideology of what is good for your multinationals also is good for the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And thank you all very much. Dereju, Pervenche, Anna, Alex, and thank you very much also from Novip. Thank you, and an applause for these people. Please. We will do two more things here on stage. I will ask Paul Tang back for a short statement, and David, he's from Portugal, and sent us some very interesting notes, which will make him an ambassador for this movement that we are talking about. So here's Paul Tang and David Gil Gonçalves.
I was hope.
There will be a statement. I guess it will be on the screen, which is a statement about tonight and about what we were talking about. And if it is on the screen, you can read it. If it is not on the screen, you can't read it. So we are in an extreme amount of tension if this statement will be actually on the screen.
Okay, fascinating. But I don't have a mic. Yes, it works. Yeah, thank you very much. I have a fascinating evening with good discussions and passionate calls for more equity. And that is what we need. People need to have the feeling that this world belongs to us. That it's not a game that is gamed in a sense that there are different rules for different people. That is the basic fairness that people call for. And this is what this evening is about. We have taken a statement from this evening, but it was already developed on the internet, collecting from all over Europe comments. And one of these comments was by David, and I would like to introduce you. David, he's our Together ambassador coming from Portugal. Please introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. So good evening, my name is David, I'm 23 years old, and I'm from Portugal, like Paul said. So basically, I'm very happy to be here, and I know that this is one of the biggest challenges that we have ahead of us, because inequality is one of the main concerns in our society, and when corporate and the top 1% start to not pay their taxes, all of us get much worse. So you pay your taxes, I pay my taxes, and they pay their tax advisors to not contribute to our society, and that needs to stop. That's our goal as socialists, and that was the bottom of my comment. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Just one remark. Because sometimes I hear people say taxation is very difficult or complicated. Maybe it is. But maybe it's not. Because the underlying principles are very simple. And those are in the statement. One of these principles are you pay taxes where you make profits. Yeah, that sounds very simple. But what do you think? You have on your phone Facebook, Google. These companies are omnipresent. They are everywhere. Where do they pay taxes? Not in the Netherlands. Not in Belgium. Not in Germany. Not in France, where the users are. Ireland, yes, and they pay hardly taxes in Ireland because then it's transferred back to Bermuda. So these companies are everywhere. They make profits here, but they don't pay taxes here. Second principle is we need equal rules for all. It has been mentioned before. Why is it that multinational, the big corporates, can pay much lower taxes than the small and medium enterprises? Why is that? That's not fair. And if you and I pay taxes, they should also pay taxes. That's why we need equal rules. And the third principle is that in the end, and this is what we aim for, that everyone pays its fair share. You and me, but also the big and the rich. That's what we're fighting for. So it's not that difficult. Live up to the principles. That are the principles of the new economy.
Thank you. I would like to invite everybody who has spoken tonight onto the stage already. And there's one final speaker, I know. But everybody who has spoken here, please, onto the stage. And I would like to invite John Crombs, or maybe Crombez, or Crombay. You never know. He's the leader of the Belgian Socialists. And he will have some final remarks for this evening. And then we will all end in an ode to joy, of which I... Here's John. I will give you my microphone, and everybody who has spoken will be on the stage also. John, some final remarks, please.
Well, let's perhaps first start. I was 5 years ago. I was in the Belgian government for the fight against fraud, and I came to Holland, to Den Hague, to meet some people here. And in the Dutch newspapers, there was lots about shell companies, mailbox companies, and what was incredible to read was that they were writing, "It's good for Holland, it's good for the Dutch people, it's good for the economy." And that's incredible. If you see what people like Gabriel Zoekman, who's doing the research, the numbers that he puts, some of the numbers were given, there's like 40% of big corporates, 40% of their profits are never shown to the authorities to pay taxes upon. And then they say, well, the law is like that. We're doing nothing illegal. Well, let's make it illegal. Because the statement that was often heard by the speakers that the big companies, they're shopping and they're telling the politicians, the law is the law and we will live to that. But it's like this size of big corporate tax fraud is so huge, so damaging, that it's like even a new phenomenon. You would have thought after the banking crisis, the banks would be calmer. It's the opposite. Because of the big banks, our national banks, banks in Holland, banks in Belgium, if they don't organize it, it doesn't happen. We also learned from the Panama Papers that European banks are still organizing massive tax fraud. And so, let's attack the banks severely if they continue this robbery. And then what Ana Gomez said, quite strongly, VAT taxes, VAT carousels. The European Union knows that they can put this crime to zero, and they don't. As we speak, in the last couple of years, and look at all your politicians, they are creating new loopholes. They are not fighting the big tax fraud. So also in the VAT business, let's close the holes. And they say it's complex. It's not the language, as Jeremy said, let's speak a language that people understand. Well, these big corporations have very nice consultants in suits that look better than Dolph's suits. I mean, what I wanted to say, they look very different than Dolph's suits. I was looking for the word. But they have consultants to make it complex. What politicians should do is make laws that are simple, that make it impossible for these big frauds to happen. And yeah. And what we politicians should do is explain to the people that the explanations that they are given, that it's better for the economy, that it's better for them, that it's better for the competition for their own companies, these statements are fraud too. They're not. And the biggest lie they're telling is that it's complex to do something about it and we should do it internationally. How many times have you heard, to explain it in the Dutch way, Holland is a tax haven, I can say that, a corporate tax haven, because Belgium is one too. How many times has there been said by Rutte in Parliament that you can only solve it on an international basis? You need all the other countries to solve it. It's a lie. Because at a certain point, and then I'll finish with my closing remarks, at a certain point in time, if you earn your money by labor, they send your check to the tax office because they want to tax it automatically. You work in a factory, they send what you earn to the tax authority. If you're a billionaire, your data wasn't sent automatically to the tax authority, because earning money by working and taxing that is normal. Earning money by having a lot of money and taxing that is not normal, apparently. But Obama put down the law and broke down the Swiss bank secrecy. And that happened in 2009. And everybody said, and all the smart economists said that. I can say that too because I'm an economist. All the smart economists said it's impossible to do something about the Swiss bank secrecy. Well, it doesn't exist anymore. There's automatic exchange of banking information. Something people said it's impossible for that to happen. It will only happen internationally when it happens. And why did it happen? Because a number of countries started to decide to do it. And the other ones had a moral problem. Because if some countries can solve it, then the other ones are obliged to follow. So let's put it forward in Holland, in Belgium, in England, in Portugal, and all the countries that were present, that we want these bills. We want legal action to make the laws more simple and abolish corporate tax fraud. Thank you very much for being here, everybody, because this is important.
Thank you. That was John Crombez, a very good-looking man for an economist. One last remark from my two of the main culprits in this great Europe that we're talking about are actually Holland and Ireland. They're two of the worst countries. I'm half Dutch, half Irish, so I had a very hard night. But still, I'm here. Thank you very much. I want to give you all a round of applause for everybody who spoke to you and who gave us ideas. Thank you very much. Europe together, or the other way around. See you again. Bye-bye. Here it is. I should have practiced something.
I always sing it. Very nice.